Fasten your seatbelts for the realest Eagles and Sixers YouTuber! One who plays no clickbait and gets to the point! The myth, the legend, Nicky Stees! Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. I'm simply statue, think it's fake, dropping unrealistic magic. 2K takes for the kick. Even though cats like that get views closer to the millie, never hear me preach, slip on to Philly. Before you watch the Eagles all the way through the early 22, authentic talk, forget what others do. Come to my channel, you know the deal. Yo, boy, always keeps things real. The 24/7, 365 way. Sports content for the reals that fill the day. Good afternoon, folks. It is around 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesday. The reason we're here Wednesday instead of Tuesday is because I had something to attend to yesterday, and that the timing of it interrupted with the show. So I decided to push it back one day. Next week we'll be back on the Tuesday slot. And while we're at it, I just realized, fun fact, I've had an episode of the 3-Point Blitz on a Sunday evening, some Monday mornings in the afternoon, Tuesday, and now Wednesday. And before we know it, we'll eventually get a Thursday, Friday, and Saturday episode of the 3-Point Blitz. But on a serious note, though, hey, this is just a one-week deal. We're doing it on Wednesday, but we're still doing it anyway. It's going to be the same show, same formula, doing this both on the Hardcore Sports Network and Nicky Stees channels. And we got Gregus and Coach Ed stopping by in the chat early, so thanks for stopping by. And with that being said, we're going to kick this off the per usual rant of the week. This week, even though he's, Philadelphia guy, Eagles fan, Sean McCoy is one of our favorite players, especially for us younger Eagle fans, I got to talk about this because as an analyst, he has recently been showing a lot of bias, but doing so, as far as him being biased, he's an Eagles fan, Eagle player. He's showing bias for the Eagles. I get it, but he's doing it in such a way that it's becoming blatant and it's hurting his credibility. And then he also gave a ridiculous take about Shedeur Sanders and Caleb Williams, saying that Shedeur Sanders is currently the better quarterback. All right, let's start off with that one. Now, we've seen it. It was late last week. He tried to imply that Shedeur Sanders is making types of plays that Caleb Williams can't make. And he's talking about how Shedeur Sanders is only a couple games into his career, implying that he's basically trying to imply that he's playing up to like a rookie Ben Roethlisberger or a rookie Dan Marino type level where they're just having this phenomenal rookie season, which Shedeur Sanders is not. He's had some moments where he's flashed some brilliance, but he's not having this great rookie season, and he's not having a better season than Caleb Williams. Number one, Caleb Williams has started the full season. Shedeur Sanders only has a handful of starts recently. Number two, the Chicago Bears are playing winning football. Caleb Williams is improving as a passer, and he's improving statistically as well. So, and we got Mitch as well. What's up? Great job last night. That's right. For those that don't know, every Tuesday at 8, we do NFL Pick'ems, me and Agent Warrior X, who's still newer to the YouTube community. But we and him do NFL Pick'ems, so definitely check him out as well. And check that out every Tuesday on the Hardcore Sports Network. And as far as back to LaShawn McCoy, the Caleb Williams thing, Williams has started all season long. He's improved his touchdown totals. The Bears have improved their win total with him as their starter, where Shedeur Sanders has only had a handful of starts so far. He's had 3 starts, and they're 1-2 in those starts. Now, to be fair, Shedeur is a rookie, but to try to imply that the guy who's only started 3 games and won 1 out of 3 is better currently than the guy who's been leading the Chicago Bears all season to where they're currently leading the NFC North and possibly having a home playoff game for the first time since 2018 makes absolutely no sense at all. Now, maybe a year or two from now, Shedeur Sanders could be a good quarterback, but you're not telling me that he's currently better, number one. That just is absolute. Come on. It's pretty obvious. And with the Eagles thing, now I get it. He's a former Eagles player. He's going to be biased in favor of his former team. I get that. So I'm not necessarily mad at him for having his Eagles bias, but he's doing so in such a blatant way that it's hurting his own credibility. Case in point. Usually, I started to notice this recently. And it came full circle after the Monday night game when the Eagles lost to the Chargers and Hurts had 5 turnovers. He's very critical of quarterbacks of other teams. When someone like Brock Purdy had that multi-turnover game in the win against the Panthers in that Monday night game, he was very critical of Brock Purdy's performance. He's also very critical of guys like Dak Prescott as well. So he'll get very critical of these other quarterbacks. But then when it was Jalen Hurts' turn and he had a bad game, he was being blatantly soft in comparison to his tone toward pretty much any other starting quarterback in the NFL. It's like, wait a minute. Now I get it. You're leaning toward the Philadelphia Eagles. We all know that, but don't be so blatantly biased about it where you're going, Jalen Hurts had a bad game. It was a bad game, or he had a headache in the locker room beforehand. That's an exaggerated take. He didn't really say that, but he's usually very soft with the Eagles when it comes to criticize them to a point where it's blatant, where even as an Eagles fan, you can't defend them anymore because it's like, look, you're starting to lose credibility now. You're starting to make it look like, oh, Eagles fans are you're put out that image to other fan bases that, oh, Eagles fans are Eagles people are very soft on their own team. They're very hard on everyone else, but they're soft on their own team. They're just bleep talkers. When that's not necessary. When Sean McCoy doesn't necessarily represent all of us. You guys remember last week I came on here and I was critical of Jalen Hurts' performance. I didn't try to call for him to get replaced, but I did criticize his performance against the Chargers for throwing 4 picks and having a fumble as well. Because you can't be, because I want him to do better. And he certainly did do that this week, which we'll get to more in a minute. But I get that you don't want to say anything bad about the Eagles because they're the organization that drafted you and paved the way for you to have the platform you have now. And then we got Coach comments. Is the statement better based on talent surrounding each and with each rookie season? It's hard to compare the two with certain limitations of one over the other. And when it comes to rookie, exactly, because Caleb Williams started his rookie season last year. Shedeur Sanders is only going to get a handful of starts this season. And furthermore, you got a much larger sample size with Williams than Sanders. For him to say that Shedeur is currently better, now, I mean, maybe it is in a certain context. Maybe he feels that Shedeur Sanders' rookie season is better, but you got to be a little more specific. Though the way he's framing it doesn't come across that way. It sounds like he sounds like a hack who's just putting out takes for attention. It's like, all right, man, you're going to start losing your credibility, especially the bias I get with the Eagles, but the way he goes soft on players for having bad games like Hurts, AJ, Smitty, and those go, or the defense, but then we'll go on a huge rant about how everyone else is terrible, how the 49ers are bad, or how Baker's bad, or how the Raiders are awful. It's like, you're starting to make it a little too obvious, man. We can't be having that. You got to at least maintain your credibility and call out your own guys too. At least be consistent. Either tone it down with some of the other teams or bring up the criticism about the Eagles. One or the other. The point is he's becoming, what's the word? It's starting to become a little bit ludicrous, and he's becoming more of a character. But then again, that might work in his favor. So if it works in his favor and gets people to respond to him or comment on it, then at the end of the day, my take isn't really going to mean that much. But just want to get off my head. From my perspective, Coy, you got to do a better job with it if you want to represent the Philadelphia Eagles and mainstream sports analyst. So that's all I'm going to say there. We're going to move on, though. We're going to start talking about the week. And say I'm a big Shedeur fan, but I do need see more playing time from him. Also, the head coach He's head coach that truly believes in him. Exactly. And we saw that 2 weeks ago in the Titans game where Shedeur Sanders was the guy who led the way and carried them. But then for some weird reason, Kevin Stefanski pulls him for a 2-point conversion to run some ridiculously botched trick play that didn't work and ultimately cost them the game. Now, we don't know for sure if Shedeur would have converted that 2-point conversion, but you would have had a much better shot based off the way that game was playing out. So that would be one example of needing a coach that truly believes in him. Because remember, they wanted to go with Dillon Gabriel when the Flacco experiment 2.0 didn't work out. And then they were forced to turn to Shedeur later. So that's another indication that Kevin Stefanski probably doesn't fully believe in him. But that's a big issue, though, and that's a subject for Black Monday. And there might be another coach that's on the hot seat for Black Monday, that being Todd Bowles of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, if the Bucs don't win the division. Because remember, they were 6-2 to start the season. I even came on here and said they're dark horse contenders, but now here we are on December 17th, 1 week shy of Christmas Eve, recapping the Bucs dropping another game, falling to 7-7, blowing a 14-point lead over the Atlanta Falcons, who, to their credit, they came back, scored 2 touchdowns, but to their own demise, almost demise, they tried to go for it twice and failed both times. They were forced to go for a field goal on the final play. Quite frankly, they were lucky, based off the 2 failed 2-point conversions, that they were in position to kick a game-winning field goal down by 2 late. This says more about the Buccaneers falling apart late in the game than it does the Atlanta Falcons at this point. Although, to be fair, I got to give Kyle Pitts credit first. Kyle Pitts had an excellent performance. He's the first tight end since Shannon Sharp to have 150 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns in a single game. So shout out to Kyle Pitts for doing that right there. You got Pete Carroll. You got Gregor says he thinks Pete Carroll's done too. Absolutely. And speaking of Pick'ems, we got my co-host from the Pick'ems, Agent Warrior X, dropping by in the chat. Thanks for stopping by. As I said earlier, we do the Pick'ems every Tuesday night, 8 p.m. to preview the upcoming week on the Hardcore Sports Network. So thanks for stopping by. And I can't believe it, though. The Buccaneers, man, that said more about them as a team than it did the Falcons. Because here you are, you were 6-2. You're looking like a dark horse contender. And, well, to be fair, they could still win their division. But even if they do, this would be the 4th straight season they win that division as the number 4 seed. And so far, 2 of those 3 times they've won the division as the 4th seed, they got bounced in the opening round. And that 2021 doesn't count because they were the 2 seed against the 7 seed Eagles. I'm talking about the 3 straight seasons they've been the 4 seed hosting a home playoff game. They got bounced 2 out of 3 in the opening. And Todd Bowles, I'm sorry, but Bowles out, not there's his own. I mean, you got to be realistic at this point. Ever since Arians stepped down as coach, they've barely won their division 3 straight years, usually an 8-9 win team at best. They've been bounced in the opening round 2 of those 3 times, and we're not even sure if this year they're going to win the division. You got to start having that conversation. Like, Todd Bowles was excellent as a defensive coordinator and helped them win that Super Bowl, but as far as being a head coach goes, it's like he had his first shot with the Jets. Now, he might get some benefit of the doubt because he didn't have the best talent. So he went to being defensive coordinator, had an excellent run there, took over as head coach, got his second chance, but now we're seeing it in his 4th season as head coach, the big collapse, and looks like they're stuck in the same spot. You got to start having that conversation. I'm sorry, the explicit rant after the game about we screwed up, we effed up, we can't do right. That ain't going to work. That's not going to save you at the end of the day when it truly comes down to it. So the Falcons, congrats to Kyle Pitts on an excellent game. Moving right along. This was a relief, folks. After weeks of just dreadful, 3 straight losses, questionable play call, we got a win. So it helped out great. We got the Raiders on the schedule. And we shut them out. Now, what can we confirm from this? A, that this defense is better than it was 2 years ago when we collapsed. I do believe if we would have played the 2025 Raiders with our 2025 offense, but our 2023 defense, Raiders would have probably gotten a few scores on us. We still would have won the game, but the Raiders would have actually scored some points. Point I'm getting at is this year's defense is better. That's the difference between 2 years ago and now. Now, the Eagles, this is the perfect opportunity right here. All you need is either one more win against, you got the Commanders twice, and then you got the Bills in between, but you got the Commanders twice. They should be able to at least win one of those two games. And all you need is one Kenmore Cowboys loss, which is looking probable. Now they got to go against the Chargers. So I like the odds. And it is, yeah, the Raiders are a dreadful team. But that's what's great about it for the Eagles. It played out perfectly in their favor. They got to go against trash masquerading as an NFL team in the Raiders, or who need to blow it up yet again. Perfect punching bag to take out their frustrations for 3 losses, come back at home, have an easy field day against the Raiders. Jalen Hurts can put that game behind him, get some confidence brewing again. A.J. Brown had a touchdown. The defense shut him down. A non-existent Raiders offense to no points. Great win for the great win to take out your frustrations on. I'll say that. Now, bring on Washington could be a perfect opportunity to clinch the NFC East. Now, playoff time, I'm still got my concerns about the Eagles and what they're going to do come playoff time. Because even if they get the 3 seed, which is where it's looking like it's heading right now, they probably got to go and play against probably either the Packers or the 49ers. Because it looks like the Seahawks are likely going to be the 5 seed. Or the Rams, depending on how that works out. What if my Giants and the beating the Raiders and losing number 1 overall pick? I could see that happening. Yeah, because that's a big tank bowl coming up soon. Giants and Raiders. Ooh. It's going to be an interesting one. And now for the Eagles, at least you got the win for now. So it doesn't look like a full-blown collapse. So just bring on Washington, move on from there. But this next one actually was interesting. We said last week this had the potential to be a shootout, and sure enough, that's exactly what we got. The Buffalo Bills beat the New England Patriots. The 2 teams are now split for the season, and Buffalo theoretically still has a chance of winning the AFC East. It's a long shot because the Patriots have the better record, and it looks like they're probably going to win out, but theoretically there is still a chance the Bills could win that division, and that's because they got a clutch win coming from behind, falling down a few scores early. They managed to impressively turn the game around in their favor. Josh Allen did the usual Josh Allen thing of putting up good in-game numbers and fantasy numbers as well. So shout out to Josh Allen again. Excellent performance. But, he had 3 touchdowns in this one. You even had James Cook. We like to sometimes get on Cook for fumbling, but he is a good player. For some of the guys that say that Josh Allen doesn't have any help, hey, James Cook has been consistent. And in this game, he had 107 yards and 2 touchdowns of his own. So it wasn't just the Josh Allen show. James Cook delivered too. Dawson Knox had 2 touchdown passes. So to be fair, you have some web work on offense too, not just Josh Allen. Like, say you have James Cook, Dalton Knecht. You got some decent guys. See, you got some pieces here. You got Khalil Shakur is a decent option at receiver. So there is some talent there. Now, if you want to say that he doesn't have any real true number 1 elite receivers, yes, that is true. But there are guys on there that can help. And Gregor brought up a point. The Bills' defense is and has been one of their weak points throughout the season. If you look at the rematch against Miami, which they lost by upset, that was one of their weak points in that game. Even the win against Tampa Bay, their defense made it a lot closer than it should be. So you've seen times where the Bills' defense has been vulnerable, and that has been one of their weak points too. But at the same time, I got to give credit to both teams. This was a really good game. Here you had Drake May still, even in defeat, against a top-tier team. I mean, he went out there, he's all right, but he threw a pick. He got sacked a few times. It's all right, but you had Trayvon Henderson had himself a really good game here. 14 carries, 148 yards. He at least showed that, hey, he can be an impact player even in defeat. And Drake May did have 2 rushing touchdowns too. So the team at least showed, hey, they belong with the top teams even in defeat. And that can be a good morale victory for the Patriots. Even with the spot at the same time, the 21-0 blown lead is a bit of a concern. So it's like, and to some degree, yeah, it at least showed they can play and make it competitive with the good teams. But they got to learn from their mistakes, not to get overzealous when you're up big. And that's something that Vrabel and Cruz got to improve on. But this ended up being a really good game, a great offensive shootout, and it was fun to look at. So kudos to both teams. Bills are just a game back, so we'll see if there's a shot at the division or not. Well, while we're still on the subject, Reese coming off the Eagles, let's talk about what happened with them and the Washington Commanders. The Washington Commanders, New York Giants. I mean, wow. To think, I thought maybe with Jackson Dart was playing, they'd have a shot. Because the Commanders look dead in the water. But, hey, they got the win in this one in a tank bowl. So, I'll put it this way. The Commanders won the game, but the Giants win the tank. Unfortunately, Jackson Dart had to come out of the game briefly to get evaluated for a concussion. He passed the protocol. He's allowed to return. So, but I think it was a safety measure. They just wanted to make sure. But the fact that Jackson Dart's already missed time with a concussion and had to go in concussion protocol again, shout out to Agent Warrior X, my co-host on Pick'ems, who's a Giants fan, said he pushed into the urgent need to get an offensive lineman to protect Jackson Dart. Now, fortunately, he was able to return, but that draws a red flag. First, he already missed time due to concussion, and just the fact that weeks later he even had to step into concussion protocol does raise some concerns about his long-term durability. Some concerns, which is why I think the Giants would be smart, get an offensive lineman, give Dart some protection, because that would certainly help. And in this game, you could see it just wasn't that good. And Mike Kafka, my Agent Warrior X also criticized Mike Kafka's play calling too, which that's part of the problem when you have to fire your head coach mid-season. You take an interim coach who's never been a head coach before, and you expect them to lead the way. What do you expect to happen? It's not really going to work. That's like a plumber leaving a family member who's not a plumber to do a serious job. What do you think is going to happen? It's not going to work out too well when you give someone who has no plumbing experience a task. It's kind of the same thing here. And for Washington, I'll say this. The good thing for them is Von Miller passed Jared Allen for 12th in all-time career sacks. He's at 136.5. So congrats to Von Miller. That's the one good thing that came out of this. And it's crazy to think Washington hadn't won a game since October. And now the Giants also, being that the Commanders won, they haven't won a game since October. Think about it. The last team they beat was, the Philadelphia Eagles. So good luck with your tank. We'll be looking forward to that Giants-Raiders tank bowl. But moving right along, because we're actually going to talk about a team who is kind of going in the opposite direction of tanking. They actually have some potential. They're in playoff contention. They would, even if the season ended today, win the division. That's the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, they did beat the New York Jets. Okay, they beat a dumpster fire team that's also in the tank bowl race. But on one hand, it's good it was a great opportunity for the Jaguars. Don't necessarily hate them for it. Hey, they took advantage of an opportunity against a dreadful Jets team to have an dominant performance, put up over 40 points, get the players' confidence going as they enter playoff mode. So that was good that came out of it for them. And Trevor Lawrence Now, I still don't think he's a top quarterback. Don't let the record fool you. It's about more than just that. I feel like it's the team as well. They've had a favorable schedule all season long. So that's played in their favor. Plus, you also have a pretty solid run game. Their defense, Josh Hines-Allen, is one of the leaders on that team. So I feel like those are all big factors too, as well. Because you had they played Indianapolis a week ago during the Daniel Jones game. They had the they took advantage of it. They've also played against other dreadful teams as well. But the Jaguars found ways to win. That's what matters. You had Trevor Lawrence had 5 touchdowns picked apart whatever's left of that Jets defense. Travis Etienne Jr. had 3 receiving touchdowns in this one. That's right, 3 receiving, not rushing touchdowns. So, and that's what led to the Jets' decision to ultimately fire Steve Wilks as defensive coordinator. I feel like on one hand, this is a scapegoat. Kind of what they did last year with Saleh. They used him as a scapegoat when it wasn't working with Rodgers. I feel like they're kind of using Wilks as a scapegoat because what do they have on defense to actually work with? You got rid of Sauce Gardner to the Colts. You let Quinnen Williams go. So you got rid of some of your best assets on defense, which wasn't much to begin with. What do you expect Wilks to do with the talent around him? You got to put the blame on the organization too. But that's been the story of the Jets for the longest time now. Always find somebody else to put the scapegoat on. Draft poorly and always find a scapegoat. And looks like that trend's continuing so far. But for the Jaguars, hey, I'm looking forward to the game with the AFC South on the line between them and the Houston Texans. We know the Texans came back and beat them earlier, and that started their turnaround to now they're at the point where they've have a nice little winning streak going, and they continue to build momentum, dominate against the Arizona Cardinals. I got to say, the more I see the Texans, it's like the talent's starting to bloom now. Early in the season, this looked like a struggling team. We were questioning about D'Amico Ryan's future. We were questioning C.J. Stroud, thinking he might have been just a one-year wonder, but now the team as a whole is doing great. C.J. Stroud, perfect job. He had a great game here against that Cardinals defense. Now, I feel like Stroud this season, the way he's been playing this season is the one thing that stops them from being true contenders because they got an excellent defense. They got Nico Collins as an underrated receiver, so they got pieces to work with. You got Dalton Schultz, who's a good tight end. Look, Texans have a pretty good team. Defense-wise, you got a lot of good players there on that defense, too. Willie Anderson Jr., you got guys like Damon Clark. Who else do you have? Who's the defensive back? You got Derek Stingley Jr. You have some pretty good pieces there. So I'm not at all in any way, shape, or form knocking them. Yeah, Aziz Al-Shaair, pretty good defense all around. And they've been helping out on this winning streak now. The Texans were 3-5. Now they're at 9-5. That's 6 straight wins. And it kind of started with that comeback against the Jaguars, where now they're in position potentially win out the AFC South again, depending on what happens when they play the Jaguars in the rematch. So it's I got to give the Texans credit. Nice turnaround there by D'Amico Ryans when we thought his job might be in danger, but they find ways to keep winning, and now they're in the playoff picture. So we have to see where they go from there. And I will say this about the Cardinals. For everyone that said it was Kyler Murray's fault that he was the cancer, Murray's not even the starter anymore. With Jacoby Brissett now, he did throw 3 touchdowns in this one, but he did throw the few. But this team still is terrible. Shame for Trey McBride, shame for Marvin Harrison Jr., because these guys are basically having their talents wasted on this dreadful Cardinals team. And you see without Kyler Murray, they're still losing games. They're still dreadful. Maybe some of the bigger problems include coaching, the front office who was fooled by Cliff Kingsbury and thought he'd be their savior. back in the 2019 offseason when everyone else saw the writing on the wall at the time and said this wasn't going to work. Yeah, I don't think Kyler Murray's the biggest problem in Arizona. I think it has more to do with the front office and the structure around him. Because I believe Kyler Murray, you give him a new system, and that's a big if, mind you, he could do better. We've seen what happened with QBs like Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield in Tampa, even though recently Reeks hasn't looked that great, or the ultimate example, Steve Young. They got him out of Tampa. He went to the 49ers and became a legend. The point being is second chances could rejuvenate a career. And I think for Kyler Murray, we realized maybe the Cardinals were the bigger problem. Maybe a new system would help him out. But that's a big subject for another time, man. But credit to the Texans. Moving right along, speaking of the AFC, this is brutal. Now, let's start off with the main part. Let's start Kansas City. So the Chargers beat Kansas City. Now, Kansas City is 6-8, and they're out of playoff contention. It's over for this season. But not just that. Patrick Mahomes went down with an ACL injury. He got help to the locker room. And now they're believing that the injury might be worse than expected. And I was actually interesting. I was at the gym earlier. I was talking to someone I know at the gym who's also a football fan. He thinks that the smart thing would be to do, because you know that the injury in mid-December, you're not going to be at 100%, especially an ACL injury. You're not going to be 100% come September time, referring to September next year. He even said that he thinks maybe Kansas City should wait till he's 100%. It would be more beneficial in the long term. I thought about it. I'm like, that could happen. Maybe that could happen, but we got to see. But maybe that would be a smart idea in the long term. Wait till Mahomes is fully ready. Don't try to rush him back. But realistically, I see that happening. And for Kansas City, it just got to a point where it just ran its course, I feel like. I feel like the way the Eagles destroyed them in last year's Super Bowl, it kind of took the aura off them a bit. And it kind of, our domination got to their head. And you see this season, it's like they're at a point where they're relying too much on Mahomes to make all the plays. You got Rashid Rice, who's still a good option, but you got Mahomes, Rice on defense, relying on Chris Jones, and there's not a lot of other real noteworthy players. I mean, you still got some decent talent, such as, no pun intended, Xavier Worthy. Travis Kelce, you're starting to see that he might be winding down a little bit as a player. He still has his moments, but you're starting to think that maybe Travis Kelce's at that point where he's thinking more about life after football. He's thinking about starting a family. He's thinking about his upcoming wedding. He might be focused more on that. And if that's the case, maybe for Travis Kelce, who's got a ton of money, who's married to a singer with who's going to be marrying a singer with a ton of money, maybe it's time to call it a day. Now, to be fair, Travis Kelce could still get money post-football playing days, too. He could still get endorsements. He could still do commercials with him and Jason. He could probably even get a job as an analyst, maybe side by side with Jason or for CBS or Fox. I still think Travis Kelce could still have a future making money post-football playing. But the point being is, though, Kansas City, it got to the point where it ran its course, relying on Mahomes, Kelce for all these years, and Chris Jones. It's gotten a little stale and complacent. They got to start making some changes. Got to start focusing on build. Well, now with Mahomes being injured this year, they're going to have to focus on the offensive line, finding a true number one option they haven't had at receiver. They haven't had since Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce officially became the number one option when Hill went signed with Miami, but they haven't had that true number one option. But for the Chargers, they got a long road to recovery. I'll say that. Now, moving along to the Chargers, because we got to give the Chargers credit. Going into the season, we thought the Chargers might be cursed because of the offensive line woes. And based off recent history, there's an understandable reason to feel that way going into the season, because the Chargers haven't made the playoffs back-to-back years since 2008 and 2009. Now, that's not official yet, but they're at 10-4. 3 games left. I love the odds of the Chargers clinching the playoffs for the back-to-back years for the first time in nearly 2 decades. And in this one, they did enough. Now, granted, it wasn't a great offensive game. You did have, scoring-wise for the Chargers, they had 1 touchdown. Omarion Hampton did okay on the ground. It wasn't a great offensive game for either team, but the Chargers did enough. And to be fair, they got 2 turnovers later in the game that played out. They got one on Mahomes early in the game before he went down. Then when Minshew filled in at the end, when the Kansas City was driving in field goal range to tie the game, they got a pick on Minshew. So Chargers defense showed up, did their thing, got a few picks to help out. And they did get 5 sacks as well, which helped them out. So it wasn't a pretty game, but the Chargers got the job done. Obviously, prayers out to Patrick Mahomes on a full recovery. Whether you like him or not, you don't wish injury upon anybody. That's just the basic human thing to do right there. And then Dimpais and Arku said Mahomes' ACL injury sucks. Okay, he's telling us where he was when it happened. But I didn't find out about. I didn't actually see it in real time. I was checking out the Eagles game at a bar, and then, I saw it when I got home. I got home early evening. I came back and started to look around. That's when I found the news about Mahomes' ACL injury after the game was over. But, man, that wasn't the only ACL injury. There's another one we're going to talk about when we get to the 4 o'clock games. But we got 2 more games to go for the 1 o'clock games. These 2 are going to be pretty much a breeze. So let's just say congrats to the Chargers. Another 10-win season. Likely clinching the playoffs again. But the question is, what are they going to do when they actually get there? Particularly with Justin Herbert. Because we've been there a few times before they get there, but they don't do much when they get there. And then oh, man, what? Oh, man, crazy part is, funny story. Last week on the Pick'ems, I said I think the Bengals could beat the Ravens with Joe Burrow back. The offense was looking really good, but I don't know what happened. Did Burrow just throw in the towel or something? Because seriously, this doesn't make sense. This was almost like the Thanksgiving Day with the roles reversed, with the Ravens being the one in cruise control. That's what it seemed like here. And sure enough, it kind of did play out that way. Lamar Jackson had 2 touchdowns in this one. He only had 1 pick, but they turned it around. Derrick Henry had a 100-yard game on 11 carries. I'm surprised they didn't just give Derrick Henry the ball a little bit more, considering. But hey, and, the Ravens didn't have to do much. Burrow, he threw 2 picks, had 3 sacks. You know what's funny? For anyone in here, if you're a wrestling fan, you're familiar with the Shawn Michaels Lost My Smile. Barry McCuckner, who's a popular YouTuber, does weekly recaps. He claimed that Joe Burrow basically pulled a HBK and lost his smile. Now, I'll say this. Did it look like he gave up on the season? It looked like it from this game. It did come across that way. But for the Ravens, man, they're still fighting for their shots. They're 7-7, but they would need to beat the Steelers in a rematch to have a shot at the AFC North, which I feel if they don't get that, got to start fresh at the head coaching helm. Look, Harbaugh brought him a Super Bowl. He's gotten him to a couple conference championship games. So credit to Harbaugh for all the good things he did. But if they don't win the division this year and they miss out, it might be time to start fresh. And some people would say, why would you want to do that to their winningest coach in franchise history? Sometimes even solid or good teams can benefit from new blood. We saw Tampa Bay. They were in contention in the early 2000s. They got rid of Dungy, which actually worked out better for both Tampa and Dungy in the long term. Tampa was able to get John Gruden when he was on the outs with the Raiders, which worked out perfectly in that Super Bowl, didn't it? And then Dungy, it worked out better. He got to go to Indy, coach Peyton Manning, and win a Super Bowl. Or you see the Denver Broncos after the loss to the Indianapolis in between Super Bowl 48 and Super Bowl 50. They fired John Fox, brought in Gary Kubiak, and they ended up winning a Super Bowl with Kubiak. So sometimes if you're a pretty mediocre or good team, could replace their head coach and all of a sudden take that next step right away. So sometimes you just need a new voice to make it happen. And I think if the Ravens don't win the division, that could happen. I mean, they pretty much got a free win here against the Bengals, but it says something about this game where we're focused more on the Ravens long term than we are on the fact that they won by shutout. It says more about them playing a bad team, but moving right along. Last one. We're going to try to breeze through this one. Chicago Bears beat the Cleveland Browns. Hey, shout out to Ben Johnson. He's doing what he's doing. They put the loss to the Packers behind them, dominate the Cleveland Browns, and Shedeur Sanders looked like a rookie in this one with 3 picks. And I got to say this. Shout out to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who's found his fit outside the Philadelphia Eagles. He got traded to Houston. He didn't really fit in there. The Ravens, he didn't really fit. But now he's with the Bears. He's had back-to-back games with a pick. C.J. Gardner-Johnson's found his niche. Sometimes, like Blaze Radio says on the Pick and Roll podcast, sometimes a player just needs to find the right fit and they can excel. So shout out to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. And sometimes in the case of Caleb Williams in the offense, a quarterback just needs the right coach to get in their ear and push them. And that's what Ben Johnson has done. So shout out to Ben Johnson for keeping the Bears in cruise control of the NFC North at 10-4. Now they got a rematch with the Packers on Saturday. They can get them back for that loss 2 weeks ago and possibly win the division. But we'll have to wait and see. But before we get into the 4 o'clock game, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned because we got more to talk. All right, ladies. All right, folks. Thanks. We're right back after a quick break. We went through the 1 o'clock games. Now it's time to dive into discussing the evening and primetime games. And since we closed out the previous session talking about the Chicago Bears, let's talk about a game involving their NFC North rival, the Green Bay Packers. Actually, we'll have two games to talk about that involve them. First, let's talk about the main one. Now, this right here was a huge deal. First, this was a big marquee matchup between two of the best teams in the NFL. Denver Broncos, Green Bay Packers at Mile High Stadium. And it delivered in terms of being an exciting game. Bo Nix threw 4 touchdowns, which, kudos to him. I'm starting to notice a trend. Bo Nix, regardless of whether he's playing great individually or playing solid, the Denver Broncos are a good enough team to do what they need to when needed to. I think the Broncos went into this game knowing in the back of their minds, like, oh, we're playing against the Green Bay Packers. We're probably going to have to score a lot of points here. And they did just that. Denver Broncos took care of business. They maintained grip with home field advantage in the AFC in what was a rematch from Super Bowl 32, and a pretty good one, too. You had 4 touchdowns there. Courtland Sutton led the way receiving. But there is one big story for the Packers that they got hurt at the worst time imaginable this season. That's because their star player they traded for during the offseason, right before the start of the regular season, they had a trade. They got Micah Parsons, and Parsons goes down on a non-contact play. And he even had a forced fumble earlier in the game before he went down with the injury. Now, that's a big concern for the Packers, because you're taking the Green Bay Packers defense with Parsons versus without him. I kind of compare it to those mid-90s Bulls versus without Michael Jordan. With Michael Jordan, they were the show that ran the NBA. Jordan, Pippen, Phil Jackson, Ron Harper, even Dennis Rodman eventually joined. They were the team that ran the league. And then you had without Michael Jordan, they still had Coach Phil, still had Scotty, still had Harper and those guys, and they were still a good team. But missing Michael Jordan made them a whole different team. And I feel like the Packers defense, that's what it's like this year, because they've been elite all season with Parsons. And even without him, they still have a pretty good team. They have Jeff Hoffley as their defensive coordinator. He did good with them last year. They still are a good team without him, but without Parsons, it's kind of like those Phil Jackson Bulls without Jordan. They're still good, but they're not going to be at their best. And that's kind of what I see here with the Packers. And that's going to be a concern for them. Now they got to go up against the Chicago Bears in a rematch at Soldier Field. But don't get me wrong, the Packers still have a solid team around them, but wasn't the only player that left with an injury, too. You also had, was it Dobbs or you would tell you Parsons is out. Christian Watson was out. He left the game early, but he is supposedly good. He has a chance of playing. He's questionable for week 16. So as of now, the Green Bay Packers have listed Christian Watson, who left the game early, as questionable. Well, Parsons, unfortunately, has an ACL injury. He's out the season. And he's probably going to, I would say, with Parsons, with the Packers, same thing as with Kansas City with Mahomes. Wait till he's 100% to bring him back. Because, Parsons being an ACL injury, but, it's not, it's going to take mid-ACL injury mid-December. You're not going to be at 100% in September. It's one of those injuries that takes a long time to make a full recovery from. And not to mention with Parsons being a bigger than Mahomes, that could play a factor in recovery time as well, especially for a bigger person, for a bigger athlete. When they have a serious injury, it could take longer. The recovery time could be longer. So but we don't necessarily know. That's just just speculation, though. But it's bad for the Packers in this one. And Jordan Love's little streak he was on. Little tear kind of came to an end in this one. He had a pick against them. And they still scored points on offense. He still had a touchdown, but he had 2 picks, actually. Love kind of reverted back to the multi-turnover Jordan Love that has people thinking, yeah, he's not the long-term answer. So that's a big concern for them right there, but it is one game. Packers are still 9-4-1. They're likely still going to make the playoffs, but they fell to the 7th seed. Could you imagine 3 straight years being the 7th seed? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, but I still think Packers have enough talent to at least win and make the playoffs, I feel like. And I think that sweep over the Lions is going to make a difference in playoff seeding. But fortunately for the Packers, the Lions also took an L in that game against the Rams, which I'll say this, thank you, football gods, for blessing us. I got to see the evening games with the opportunity to see this one. This was a really good offensive game. We had, this is what we expected. 2 offensive juggernauts going out there, just trading blows. Kind of reminded me of like the 49ers Saints game from the 2019 season without as many points, though. Kind of reminded me of that game, or just 2 really good offenses out there playing well, or like the Rams in Kansas City from 2018 Monday night, with less points, though, but still really good game all around, particularly from the quarterbacks who had total 5 passing touchdowns from Goff and Stafford. Both of them looked really good in this game. But you had the running game for the Lions was a little bit slower. You had Jamar Gibbs, David Montgomery. Neither amounted to 40 or more yards individually. And they, respectively, as a team, only got, 60 yards as a team. 38 for Gibbs, 32 Montgomery. They got 60 combined rushing yards, which is not very characteristic of the Lions. But got to give the Rams defense credit in that. That does make a difference. I know the team's like, hey, was up the Nest out west? Stopping by my stream. I haven't seen your name in a while. Thanks for stopping by and enjoying the 3-point blitz. Me talking about the NFL in week 15. And what an interesting week it was. Yeah, that at the same time, though, while this wasn't much of a great defensive game, the Rams defense does get credit for shutting down Gibbs and Montgomery. But the offense was really good. You speaking of running backs, so the Rams, that's the difference here. The Rams effectively ran the football. You had 2 plus 70-yard rushers, and Kyron Williams with 78, 2 TDs on 15 carries, and Blake Corum, who 11 carries at 71 yards and a TD. So credit to the Los Angeles Rams for being able to run the ball when the Lions weren't that effective. And that's what made the difference in this one on offense, why the Rams outscored the Lions. Now, don't get me wrong, the Lions did put up a good effort, too. You had Puka Nacua, had himself a really good game. He had 9 receptions, 181 yards. It was crazy because I remember first Devontae Adams ended up leaving the game early. But supposedly the Rams think, as of today, Wednesday, they're saying that he could still play tomorrow against Seattle, which heads up, that's the Thursday night matchup, week 16, Rams-Seahawks. But back to the Lions-Rams game. You had Devontae leave the game, and for the Rams, there was a scary scene where Puka Nacua went down, and you're thinking, oh, did they just lose their 2 receivers? But fortunately for Nacua, it was believed to be just cramps. He had to come out of the game for a play or so, and he did return. So the Rams got lucky. It was just something small from their top receiver. And I got to say, man, I think this reinforms that the Rams ultimately won out the Matthew Stafford trade. I truly believe that. First season, Rams going to win the Super Bowl. Now, the Lions have been a good team, outside of that first year since the trade went down, but they struggled in the playoffs, particularly last year against the Commanders when they were heavy favorites at home as the team with home field advantage. Whereas the Rams, along with that Super Bowl, last year in the playoffs, they had a pretty good run for a team that went out in the second round. They destroyed the Vikings at home, and they gave us a run for our money in the snow in the divisional round. Now this year, they're fully healthy. They have home field advantage as of today. If the season ended today, the Los Angeles Rams would have home field advantage. So I'm going to say for that right here, the Rams are still the winners of the Lions trade. Even though for a brief bit it looked like the Rams were the short-term winner, Lions were the long-term winners, but especially if the Rams do make a deep playoff run, they could easily, everyone will agree that they were the unanimous winner of this trade. And could be easily, especially if they get that home field advantage. I got them in this one. But the Detroit Lions, man, I got to give them credit. They're still a good team, but they're not winning those games they would have won last year. Last year, they dominated consistently through the regular season. But this year, they're having a lot of games where they're putting up a valiant fight but falling up short, i.e. the Los Angeles Rams game, i.e. Thanksgiving versus the Green Bay Packers. And that's us, but Goff is good when he's on. The problem is he hasn't been on a majority this year. Stafford has a Super Bowl in LA, and Goff hasn't done much in Detroit. Right now, outside of, good regular season games, no, Jared Goff really hasn't done anything spectacular. Even back when he was with the Rams, the year they got to the Super Bowl 53, remember what happened when Jared Goff got to the biggest stage in the biggest game of his career? Fell flat. So now we're starting to see why the Rams wanted to go for Matthew Stafford. And I'm not calling Jared Goff trash at all. I got him as a lower top 10 quarterback, but it's games like this where the Lions put up a good effort but fall short. That's why I don't got him as an elite quarterback. And I got to say, right, then Greg put the Rams and Broncos look like the teams to beat. Absolutely. They're both in first place in their respective conference, and they got wins in big games. So, shout out to the Rams, man. Keep an eye on them come playoff time. And for the Lions, man, I think a lot of these close losses are going to be the reason they probably miss out on the playoffs. Losing to the Rams, losing to the Packers twice, the Eagles, even losing to the Vikings. Those close losses, had they been wins, could have been big help for them, but instead it's their detriment, and I think that's going to cost them a playoff spot at the end. But speaking of teams, now we go from the Lions, who are still, despite their shortcomings, having a respectable season, to the Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints. Panthers are the most inconsistent team. I swear, they must have two personalities. There's the underrated team that ends up winning games you don't expect them to. And then there's the old, crappy Panthers we come to know in recent years. And in this game against the Saints, particularly late in the second half, the Panthers reverted to their old, crappy self we've come to know in recent years. I'm sorry, man, but what was this? I mean, come on. I mean, I'm not trashing the Saints or taking anything away from them. They did, to their credit, come back and win the game. And you got to wonder now, with the Saints winning 2 games recently, even though playoffs are way out of contention for them, you got to wonder if the Saints are finally starting to find something a little bit with Kellen Moore. Because we've seen this happen before. Remember Dan Campbell's first year? Detroit started to show a little spark in December. Remember Andy Reid's first year in Philly? The Eagles were dreadful until about the last month of the season. They started to play better, and they won a few games late in the season. Gotta wonder if we're starting to get that something similar with the Saints, where now that they're winning some games, maybe they're starting to catch something. Tyler Show was all right in this game, but here's the problem. He's a 26-year-old rookie. I don't know how much, and he's going to have a shorter ceiling to be the guy for the Saints. So you better hope the only way something like that really, truly is going to work is you got to be at Kurt Warner level starting off. But Tyler Show, well, he's showing some flashes here and there. He's not looking like the second coming of Kurt Warner in terms of being a late bloomer quarterback. And it's funny, Ness puts no one wants to win the NFC South. It's crazy. The two teams that were at the top for the division both blew fourth quarter leads against division rivals already eliminated from the playoffs. I mean, come on, Panthers. What were you doing? That second half, though, even when they had the lead, okay, the Saints, they kept going 3 and out, 3 and out. It was like, come on, Panthers. What are you doing? Whatever it is, they're not trying to win the division. It's crazy that one of those teams is ultimately the Panthers, Carolina Panthers, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, both at 7-7. One of them's going to have to win that division. Now we just got to wait for them to play each other and see how that plays out. But yeah, NFC South it's like the Twilight Zone in that division. Nothing makes any sense. The Panthers and Bucs losing to teams already out makes no sense. It's awful. So in the NFC West, outside of Arizona, it's the best division. Yeah, absolutely. I got the Rams winning that division ultimately, but yeah, you're right about one thing. It's a really good division. So I got to give them props on that. Well, 1 second, I just need a sip of water. I'll be right back. Don't worry. Real quick. All right. That chair was a little lower than expected, but hey, we back, folks. I said it would be real quick. Really need to refill my water bottle. All right, one more sip of water. We'll be right back to it. All right, now, yeah, it is like the Twilight Zone in that division. But speaking of the NFC West, so we close out the 4 o'clock games, talk about the 49ers and Titans. Now, I'll say this. Shout out to the 49ers on the win. It was against the Tennessee Titans, who are in tank bowl contention, but a win's a win. At the same time, it's like, I feel these games late in the season for teams that have gone against, you get those easy games late in the season. Like for the 49ers, the Eagles against the Raiders. Now 2 out of 3 of your final games are against Washington. That can actually be, sometimes that can be your friend late in the season. You can play those easy games, get those wins, and build momentum going for January. And we know from history proves momentum is key heading into January. We've seen the 05 Steelers. We saw the 07 Giants. We've seen the Eagles last year. We see how important that momentum can be late in the season headed playoff time. So I'll say this. It's important for the Niners. Now, the score says it was only 13 points and it says it was semi-competitive, but it really wasn't that competitive because the Titans scored 2 touchdowns in garbage time to make the game look a little bit closer. It was already 37. It was already out of reach. Titans only had 10 points entering the quarter. They had to score 2 touchdowns, make it a little bit closer. Tony Pollard ended up stat padding to 104 yards, but it just wasn't that good of a game, though, for the Titans. 49ers did what they needed to do, beat up on a bad team. Brock Purdy, yeah, he threw 3 touchdown passes. I mean, he's at least consistent in these situations. In favorable situations, he does put up good statistical numbers. So he at least does that effectively. And in this game, it was good enough to lead the Niners to a game that was more lopsided than the final score will tell you. And Christian McCaffrey had a touchdown as well. Kittle had a receiving touchdown. Jawan Jennings caught 2 touchdowns. Excellent offensive performance for the Niners on a glorified punching bag just to build momentum. So credit to them. And the Niners, hey, I could see the Niners making a deep playoff run, even as a wild card, because they've been in this situation before. They've been there before with Kyle Shanahan numerous times. NFC Championship game appearances, Super Bowl appearances. The one thing missing from them is a Super Bowl win. But the Niners are back, put last year behind them, and they still be a dangerous team come playoff time, even if they're not the NFC West champions. So don't take them for granted, even if they end up being the 6th seed. But speaking of playoffs, it's ironic that the Minnesota Vikings, who are already out, ended up actually having a field day against the Dallas Cowboys and that dreadful defense. Oh my gosh. I want to ask a question for the chat. Do you feel as though that what's going on currently with this streak and this momentum that the Vikings have built, is this them taking advantage of bad teams like the Commanders or terrible defense like the Cowboys? Or is J.J. McCarthy finally starting to find something? Because we got to remember, J.J. maybe got to ask, do you think we're a little harsh on J.J. McCarthy because they weren't up to the same standards that Sam Darnold had last year? Did we kind of let the fact he's a glorified rookie get past our head? Were we a little bit impatient in our assessment? Or do you think McCarthy's having a little lucky streak? I'll let you guys debate that. Because he has been good the past couple games. He even had the walk-in touchdown where he did the gritty. That was funny to see. And it was just hilarious, this Cowboys defense, man. See, that's what happens when you trade away your best defensive player. This is your karma, Jerry Jones. This is what you get. You also chase away your stars, your DeMarcus Lawrences, who went to Seattle, who all of a sudden is actually doing pretty solid. Oh, and speaking of Seattle, there's one more thing I wanted to discuss. So real quickly, we'll just say this. So it's like, yeah, kind of crazy, huh? How that happens. Like, I can't believe, though, but the Cowboys, that's what their karma right there. And for the Vikings, even though they're out of the playoffs, they're not tanking, so I'll give them that, say better luck next year. But good job by the Vikings. They found the perfect punching bag in the Cowboys defense. Cowboys, better luck next year. But real quickly, I almost forgot. Seahawks beat the Colts in the 4 o'clock slots. This wasn't a pretty game. It was mostly the field goal show. So we know who's going to be the NFC Special Teams Player of the Week for Week 15. Because the Seahawks beat them on field goals. Now, credit to Phillip Rivers for actually going out there, basically with a dad bod. Haven't played in 5 years, and at least doing enough to keep this game competitive. He did throw a pick by the end where Kobe with the C. Bryant got the pick. But for the Colts, man, and I say this, give credit to Phillip Rivers for trying, having the courage to go through with it. Credit to the Colts for getting there at all, but the ship's falling apart. That's 5 years removed from his last full season. Phillip Rivers ain't going to help you. And congrats to the Seahawks. Now I'm looking forward to seeing what they do against the Rams, but just wanted to touch up on that briefly. Now back the Vikings, and Narku said it perfectly. They make any QB look good, and that's pretty much what they've done now. Yeah, absolutely. We saw even Russell Wilson had himself a good game against them week 2. Let's see. Russell Wilson, you had Jordan Love, Bryce Young, even Patrick Mahomes in that win. Who else? Jalen Hurts in the first half. I'll get both times in the first half. Oh, yikes. Yeah. And that Cowboys defense has been even Mariota looked decent against them. yeah, that's their karma. And for the Vikings, we'll just see what they do going forward. But this game, it's interesting. I view this game as karma for the Miami Dolphins and business per usual by the Pittsburgh Steelers standards. Pittsburgh takes advantage of those easy games, rolls to 8 or 9 win seasons. They're at 8 wins now. One more win could pretty much help them clinch. Well, one more win clinches another winning season for Mike Tomlin. And a loss, win for them. So I give them credit. They got the win. Good job. So the Steelers are, they're what we thought they were. Consistent, middle of the pack team who usually finds a way to finish with a winning record, may sneak into the playoffs. It's kind of standard for Pittsburgh at this point. I feel like we keep saying it over and over again. Their defense is really good. They got some guys there. Asante Samuel Jr. got his first pick as a Steeler. Shout out to Asante Samuel Jr. He's a guy I wish that we had, but unfortunately it didn't happen. Patrick Queen. Cam Hayward, you got Joey Porter Jr. Oh, you got Asante Samuel Jr. and Joey Porter Jr. on the same team. Isn't that kind of cool? And for the Dolphins, this is karma. Karma for all the poor decisions they made for allowing Mike McDaniel to overstay his welcome. And this is what you get. Absolutely. This is what you get. Now the Dolphins are officially eliminated from the playoffs. Now, Tua, to be fair, had himself a pretty solid game, but it's crazy now the Dolphins are going to bench Tua and start a rookie Quinn Evers. So even though Tua had himself a pretty decent statistical game, though, they felt that his performance was enough to bench him, which I'm surprised they didn't do this earlier in the season. But once they started winning games, that was enough justification to keep the ball rolling with Tua. But it happens that he said he watched. Arku said he was watching the NBA Monday night, which is actually perfect because I'll get to that in just a second. I'll close it out with this one. Steelers are probably going to win the AFC North. And if they do, they probably go one and done. So I can't really say anything bad about them. It's not necessarily the Steelers are a bad team. They're just very complacent year after year. So before we get to some hoops real quickly, quick NFL Week 15 biggest winners of the week. Go with the Denver Broncos as Los Angeles Rams. Both won huge games in convincing fashion against worthy teams in their conference. Worthy teams, sorry, not in their conference. Hold on. So I'll get them as two of my big winners for the week. Also, along with them, I got to go with another big winner for this week is the Buffalo Bills. They managed to pull off a comeback. They stay in contention where they could potentially have a shot. They could have a shot at winning out the AFC East and having a home playoff game. But that remains to be determined. But the win saved Buffalo's chances of a home playoff game for now. So I give them credit. They managed to come back. They fell down 21-0, but they came back from adversity and won. So I give them that. Week 15, the three biggest losers for Week 15. I was going to go the Raiders, but that'd be beating on a dead horse. I'll have to go with Kansas City Chiefs as an organization for a big injury to Patrick Mahomes and losing out in the playoffs. Got to go with the Packers as well because you lost Micah Parsons, your league defensive player for the season. And that's a huge blow for them. Even with a winning record in a competitive effort, it's a big blow because of the circumstances behind the loss, the consequences of losing their best defensive player. And with that, the third biggest loser, I'll go with the Lions. Even though they're still a good team, this loss could be the difference between them getting the 7th seed or missing out on the playoffs completely. So, and this was a must-win game too, especially for a team that dropped to the Eagles, dropped to the Packers twice, dropped to the Vikings. They needed this win, and they didn't get it. So that could be the difference between playoffs and sitting at home all January. So I'll consider them losers for that right there. because of the consequences. But that's it for the NFL. But before I go, I'm going to talk a little bit about hoops now. Because last night we had the NBA Cup. And it's going to Greg and here's what he put first. Raiders and Giants for the first pick. Oh, that, folks, right there, Raiders and Giants. That's the ultimate tank bowl. Ultimate tank bowl. I mean, I don't think we've seen a tank bowl like that since 2005 season, week 17, New Year's Day 2006, Houston Texans 2-13 versus the 3-12 San Francisco 49ers. 49ers won the game. Texans got the number one pick that year. A Raiders-Giants tank bowl would be a tank bowl we haven't seen since that game in 2005. But we'll have to see. It'll be something to watch for comedic purposes. But yeah, last night, though, we also got the NBA Cup Finals. We had the New York Knicks won the NBA Cup last night. And what was a fun game against the San Antonio Spurs, a rematch from the 1999 NBA Finals. And the Knicks' first trophy banner since the 70s when they last won the NBA Finals. Or actually, for repeat, since 99 when they won the conference finals to get to the NBA Finals. But congrats to the Knicks, man. I mean, I joked about it earlier on a YouTube short that with Tex that, oh, their ceiling's the first round elimination because previous two NBA Cup winners, the Bucks last season, and then 2023, the Lakers, got bounced in the opening round respectively. But in this case, I feel like that's going to be a different story on a serious note because the Knicks are a better team than last year's Milwaukee Bucks and the 2023 Lakers. But I'm actually glad we got two of the top teams going to the NBA Cup Finals. That actually makes it more interesting. It doesn't feel like as much of a joke because it kind of felt a little bit like even with the Bucks and Lakers, even when they won the in-season tournament / NBA Cup, I never really saw them as a threat. I just felt like, yeah, that's nice. Good for them and good for the team, good for the players. But what's that going to do long term? With the Knicks and the Spurs, respectively, this was the first time I actually could see two teams that could be contenders playing in the NBA Cup. And we got a good game out of it. We saw there were even a couple, there were several leads. Or first half, there was a lot of lead changes, a lot of ties. Late in the third quarter, the Spurs got into a position where they had two 10-point leads over the Knicks, but the Knicks ultimately came back, and they ended up having themselves a pretty good game. You even had, crazy to think, OG Anunoby led the way, 28 points, and had 5 threes made in this one. Jordan Clarkson had 3 threes. You had Karl Anthony Towns hit 2 threes. He even had a nice pass. In the first half, he was being double-teamed on that assist he got. He is a sole assist of the game. He even had Wemby teaming him up. He ended up getting to get the pass to, was it Jordan Clarkson for 2? That was a nice play there. And you had the Knicks, I give them credit. They had a good game here. Now, I do have a question for anybody in the chat. Blues are the NBA Cup final. Went on a playoff run. Yep. Do you think, and Greg asked, do you think it's a good idea for the NBA? It's not a real championship. To me, I think this NBA Cup, it's about trying to get some ratings going and to get a little bit of a spark going early in the season because they know most people don't really pay attention consistently to the NBA until around like February when the Super Bowl's over. That's when viewership picks up. They want to at least get something going early in the season. Because outside of Christmas Day, they don't get a whole lot early in the season. So I think that that's what the NBA is doing this for. Two years back, Pacers went to Eastern Conference Finals and the EU. Of course, now in the Thunder last year won it all. Right. Yep. And it's actually interesting because, like I said, with the Spurs, I said, the Spurs and Knicks, I see two contenders playing each other. Remember the Spurs, even though they lost the game, it's not going to really hurt them that bad because it's just an in-season tournament, which once the season's all over, doesn't have implications at all. The implications of this one are going to be meaningless in the long haul come playoff time. Would you rather have an in-season tournament or NBA Finals? I think most of you are going to agree you'd rather have an in-season, you'd rather have an NBA Finals. And it's cool because it's actually a nice road there. They beat the Lakers. So they beat one of the top teams out west. Then they beat the defending champions in a close game, 111-109. And they fall short against the Knicks, but they put up a valiant effort. So I'm impressed with the Spurs going against other top teams out west. They managed to beat the Lakers, the defending champs. Now, it's going to be different come playoff time in a best-of-7 series because you got to beat a team 4 times, and you don't know who's going to be healthy, who's not going to be healthy come playoff time. So that's going to be interesting right there. So, but I do like what we've seen from the Spurs and from the Knicks. This is what happens when you get teams with depth on the roster. 76ers, take notes. I mean, the Sixers, they have tried to get depth on the team, but they haven't been as successful in terms of actually getting the right pieces there that could really make them a contender. Whereas you've seen teams like the Denver Nuggets, the Marco's team, the Thunder, the defending champs. You've seen the Boston Celtics a few years ago when they had all those depth pieces there. And that's why Boston keeps trading away, making trades to get future seconds because they know they're going to need those depth guys a few years from now because a lot of the role players come and go in today's NBA. You're even going to see with the San Antonio Spurs in a few years, you're going to see the guys like Castle and Vessel and those guys start to go on the move. Even the Knicks, when they went for Karl Anthony Towns, they had to give up DiVincenzo, who was one of their depth guys. Eventually guys like Josh Hart, they're eventually going to get looks from other teams. Other teams are going to try to make them offers. So the Knicks aren't going to be able to retain all those guys forever. That's why you got to strike now. And you got to keep retooling your rotational pieces because eventually, even for the Thunder with their big 3, eventually somebody's going to go get an offer somewhere else someday down the line. It's not going to happen right away, but eventually someday down the line. That's why, and that's the thing too, the Thunder still have a bunch of future draft picks too. That's why their rebuild has been so successful because they got a bunch of future picks when they trade away Russ and they trade away Paul George in late 2010s. And they've used that to rebuild that roster to what it is now, a championship contender. So what we learned from the Knicks and the Spurs point is when you've got teams with players that can make plays, in the Knicks case, you got, of course, Jalen Brunson. You still have Karl Anthony Towns, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart, Jordan Clarkson. You have good pieces around you. That can make you contenders in the long term. So on to that. There's nothing really big to talk about in the NBA right now beside that. So now the NBA Cup's over. For NBA, we'll kind of glance at it for a week, but we're really not going to, unless something big happens, we're not really going to talk a whole lot about it until around Christmas time for the Christmas Day spectacles. But I'll say this. Congrats to the Knicks on winning the NBA Cup. Best of luck doing more to give the Cup credibility come playoff time. So I'll leave it at that for this. For everyone that stopped by, Arku, Grega, Coach Ed, Agent Warrior Mitch, thanks for stopping by in the chat. I hope you enjoyed this stream. The Nest Out West who stopped by for the first time in a while, I'll definitely have to check out your channel, see what you're currently doing. So thanks to everyone that stopped by. You guys made this stream a lot of fun coming in on my Wednesday episode. But next week we'll be back at Tuesday. I don't have any obligations at the moment. But anyway, thanks for tuning in. If you don't catch me the rest of the day, have a great rest of your day. It's your boy Nicky Stees signing off. Catch y'all later.